Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. And today we are going to talk about Harley Davidson being kind of between a rock and a hard place. But of course, before we do that, we have a couple of viewer bikes to look at. And after last week's video, I've been getting a lot of submissions, so I might have to start doubling up on them in videos. But anyway, let's get to it. This is Steve's 1998 Fat Boy. A nice Evo model to begin with. After getting the bike, he's done a lot of work on it, replacing the brakes, lines, tires, shocks, and fork seals. He then installed some LED lighting, Danny Gray seat, slip-ons, and an air cleaner. Last but not least, he has 12-inch mini apes from Hill Country Customs. So thanks for sending that Evo in, Steve. Our second bike comes from Finland, and this is Jukka's bike. I hope I pronounced that right. This is a 2023 Fat Boy. He is kept mostly stock except for a windshield and saddlebags. On another note, he also hopes that the US government takes it easy on us Canadians. You and me both, boss. But thanks for sending that in. And if anyone out there would like to see their bike in a video, send me a pic and some information. My email address is in the description below. So, Harley Davidson between a rock and a hard place. This really stems from my last video. I got a lot of comments, mostly good, but of course there were the odd dickhead in the group as well. But a lot of the comments really got me to thinking. Now, last week I made a lot of comments about how bad a job I figured Harley did with my beloved Fat Boy. In my opinion, it was not good. And I got comments with a lot of people echoing my thoughts, but I also had quite a few disagree. And they brought up some good points, but the general consensus was that Harley is basically damned if you do and damned if you don't. So I made comments about mostly the styling on the 2025 Fat Boy and said that Harley keeps making changes for change's sake. And while I still believe that to be true, some folks said, why shouldn't they make changes? If there were no styling changes, we would have the exact same looking model as we did back in the day. Now, some of us would say, that would be perfect. But there are just as many that would say the style is outdated and boring after all these years. And some design changes need to be made for any upgrades the model gets, which brings me to my next point. Upgrades and tech. And one commenter said that if I really wanted to, then I could go back to 1936 or perhaps the 1980s and ride a slow, underpowered, oil-leaking bike, and then I'd be happy. And besides, I don't have to buy a new bike, and there are plenty of old ones out there if that's the style I like. And in a way, they do have a bit of a point. Now, I assume that the changes that Harley makes are hopefully to bring in some new customers or keep the ones that they already have. Now, I may not like having changes every couple of years, but I suppose it has to be done sometime. Customers no doubt would bitch and complain if Harley didn't upgrade things like their engines, things like their suspension, and add more tech. And just as many would complain that they weren't doing anything to keep up. Just look at one of the main issues that is always said about Harley Davidson. They are old and they are out of date. But when Harley does try something, like the Pan America, hoping to bring in new customers, and to say they are attempting to be just as innovative in that market, some people always pile on. And I have to admit that I am probably one of those people who is one of the problems. I am in that sweet spot of an age group of basically average Harley owners. I'm coming up on 47 years old, and I know what you're thinking. My God, does that guy look good for his age? But regardless, I am one of those people that is always raging against the changing tides. Now, I am not the biggest fan of the Pan America, or for that matter, I'm not a big fan of the revamped Sportster. But I suppose changes have to be made at some point, because people like me will eventually die off and we will need to be replaced. And it's going to have to be with younger customers. And obviously, younger folks are not going to have the same preference as I do. And for any of us that watched The Simpsons, I'll take you back to a saying from old Abe Simpson. And that was, "I used to be with it, but then they changed what it was. Now what I'm with isn't it, and what's it seems weird and scary to me." So Harley is really damned if you do and damned if you don't, because if they do change things, you will get people like me who will complain. And if they stay the same, people will complain about it. If they add more features, people will complain. And if they leave them off, people will still complain. They really can't win. There are always going to be people like me out there, and people like a lot of my viewership, that like the older models. But then there's also quite a few people who like the innovation of the newer models. And Harley's base is very loyal and very vocal, and it's going to be extremely hard for them to find a middle ground between the two of us. But from the looks of things, they're going to have to find something, and find something soon, because they are not doing well. Harley's revenue in 2024 was down 47% from 2023. And at the time of filming, their stock has also declined roughly 22% since this time last year. Luckily, for some of us kind of older folks, there are still a lot of those older bikes out there that can be bought and rode. We don't need the Sportster S. We can still get an Ironhead. And we don't need the 2018 later Fat Boys, because there are still some very good Evos out there. And maybe in the end, some of us crotchety old folks should maybe be a little less bitchy when Harley does make some little changes. But that being said, I still really don't like the styling of the 2025 Fat Boy. I still don't think it's good. But anyway, what do you folks think? Let me know in the comments, and I will catch you in the next one.